everyone. This is Talk Back. It is Wednesday, September 30th. On October 1st, we start a whole new month living in this pandemic age. I'm so happy to have with me a guest who is one of the stars, I think, in our state legislature, Senator Norm Needleman, who is the state senator from the 33rd District, which includes many of the towns in eastern Connecticut, including my town of Colchester and other of the towns. Hi, Norm. It's good to see you today.
How are you, Sheila? Not too many people would call me a star, so I'm going to call you all the time.
Okay, well, you are in the legislature. Don't forget, you had a tight race a couple of years ago. You won a kind of a landslide eventually after some recounts. It was exciting. It was suspenseful. But you've been doing, in my opinion, and yes, I am a partisan, there's no question about it, but you've been doing a wonderful job representing our district, communicating with us, putting forth bills, and taking the lead in the energy issue, which we're going to talk about. But before we get to that, I want to talk about the overall race. We've got an election in about, 5 weeks away. And last night we had a debate between Biden and Trump that many people just said it was almost unwatchable. It was lack of any dignity or any coherence or intelligence, and it was very difficult. And I thought of you. I said, I'm talking to Norm tomorrow. He would never behave that way. He's the kind of person that builds bridges between people. He's soft-spoken. He's intelligent. He wants to find common ground. He will talk to his Republican friends. How can we get back to that kind of environment? And tell me your overall thoughts about the race this year and being a Democrat now.
Well, thank you. And I want to say that last night was embarrassing, and it was a shame that we ended up in the mud. I think that when a candidate can't stop themselves from talking over their opponent continually, and to the point where the moderator is chastising the president of the United States for not following the rules that his party and his team agreed to, it just speaks to what we've been living with for 4 years. I am not the most hyper-partisan person, and you know that based on how I work with Republicans. But I do not know of a Republican colleague of mine in the state Senate that ascribes to that kind of behavior. None of them would do that in a meeting. None of them would do that if we were on TV together. None of them would do that in a debate. Even last year, my opponent and I had civil debates. That was an abomination. There were parents who had their children watching for the first time. They were hitting an age where they wanted their kids to be politically aware, and they had to send their kids out of the room, or their kids left the room crying because it was so unruly. And, it wasn't equal there. The president of the United States acted like a schoolyard bully, and the moderator just was getting frustrated at his own inability to shut it down, because that's who he is. He thinks that if he screams over you and screams louder than you, he's going to actually get his point across, when in reality, he represented, at this point, it was an embarrassment. The whole thing was an embarrassment, and I'm not sure what this means for any upcoming debates. I'm not sure what it means for any upcoming debates, but I think that going forward, you have to shut mics off and not do a split screen so the other person just keeps talking when it's not their turn. That's right. Unfortunate, but it is what it is.
So I know you're giving credit to some of your Republican colleagues in the legislature that you can do business with and talk to, but let's face it, Norm, are they speaking out, or are they just going along with what Trump is doing? How many of the Republicans that in the legislature, in the leadership of the Republican Party in Connecticut, are speaking out and having the courage to say, no, this is not the way the government should be run or the way a president should behave?
Well, not many, unfortunately. Even the people that I work with are afraid about losing their base. And as they fear that, because they'll say it in private, just like in Washington, I've heard the same thing. They'll say it in private, but they will not say it in public. We're watching, Nero fiddling as Rome burns, and no one is speaking out either out of fear of losing an election. Every Republican at the national level has either stepped aside or given up any interest in standing up for what's right. The Supreme Court nomination could not possibly be more hypocritical. If they had let Merrick Garland, be the Supreme Court justice, we would not be looking at a 6-3, majority for a super right-wing conservative group that does not want to let women have the right to choose or women control their own bodies. To me, it's appalling, just on that issue alone. But the Republicans have stood by. He's co-opted the whole party, whether it's in Connecticut or it's in Washington. I have an opponent who won't even talk about it, and I'm hoping that he comes clean on who does he support. I support Joe Biden. I support the tickets the Democrats have put forward. Joe Biden is a lifelong middle of the road guy trying to solve problems from the middle out, not the extremes in. And that's what we need to pull the country together. We cannot keep going on like we're going on. This is going to destroy the fabric of American society. Demonizing the other side's opinions is wrong. However, when you have an unruly, irresponsible, not thoughtful person leading a party, you have to speak out. It's enough. We've tolerated enough.
Okay, well, that's why I'm glad you're speaking out. And although you know how important it is to try to build bridges with the other side, and you can do it in Connecticut, you're still running as part of a team that starts with Biden, goes to our Congressman Joe Courtney, your state senatorship, your office, and then Brian Smith in the legislature, who is in our district, right? So tell me, aside from talking about the behavior and the threat that you've just said this president is and the way he behaves and does things, what are the values that make it important to you to be a Democrat? How does that set you apart from your Republican friends?
Well, I think that the Democrats, I would like to think that we are taking the moral ground. Democrats want to help. I'm not sure that in every case, some of the positions that some people have taken out of their desire to help and their methods are necessarily the things that I think we should be doing. But we start from the point of view of we believe government can be a force of good in people's lives. It's our responsibility to set an agenda, pass laws, and move things forward that make people's lives better. Government's not the solution to every problem. I certainly will say that loud and clear. But if you discount government's ability to help people, then you're basically throwing the baby out with the bathwater. The Republicans, for the last 40 years, since Ronald Reagan, have basically taken the attitude that government is bad, that government should have no role. And at the very base level, as a first selectman, the town paves the road. You don't pave the section of the road in front of your house. Government's job is to figure out what services the people of the town, the state, the country expect us to deliver, and then to deliver them efficiently and well. And that's where my experience as a business person does help. Not all business people make good legislators or good public servants, but it's not bad when you have a legislator who does a good job or a public servant who does a good job and happens to know business. You can make things more efficient. So that's my job. The Republican Party has taken the opposite tack. It's demonize government at all costs, make sure that we do nothing, just cut taxes, leave people behind, create economic despair in the country, mismanage things. It's unbelievable. Today, Senator Austin sent me an article because my committee has been a leader in moving forward on renewable energy for the state of Connecticut. So one of the biggest accomplishments I'd like to think that we did a year ago was moving a wind energy bill that will allow for the development of offshore wind in the state at grid level, 2,000 megawatts over 10 years. The cost is much lower than any other renewable energy cost that we've seen. And now the article in Bloomberg today basically said that as part of the president's shutdown of offshore oil drilling, which is a good thing, they're going to shut down the development of wind energy. Now, there are really three ways to get renewable energy. It's wind, it's sun, and it's hydropower. Connecticut is uniquely situated to take advantage of offshore wind. We have worked out details. There are more details being worked out, but the President of the United States is now, through his EPA, shutting that down because he just thinks that the solution is having more oil and gas drilled is the answer to everything. And for some obscure reason, he believes that windmills are a problem. He
Right,
didn't
yeah.
like them off of the coast of Scotland with his golf course, and he's carried that almost crazed belief into the public sphere, and it's quite embarrassing.
Right. So you made two good points, Norm. You you went back to Reagan for the sentiment that so many Republicans have, that government is the problem, government is bad, do as little as possible. And of course, they've been trying to privatize so many things. When they say government is bad, when they starve government by cutting costs and cutting resources needed for services, then they can say, well, that failed. We have to now take it over privately. So that's a good point that you made about the difference between Democrats and Republicans. And the other point you just made is that everything that Trump seems to do arises not just only from ignorance, but also from a real narcissistic self-interest. And we've learned that. Let's go back to the beginning. You started in this position, and before you knew it, we were faced with the pandemic that we've been dealing with for the last, 7 months now, at least. Go back to March, even before February. Connecticut's done a great job compared to other states. Our governor's done a great job. But guess what? I opened the Hartford Courant today, Norm, and it said cases are rising and hospitalizations are rising. What's going on? Tell me about it.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that Needleman has done a great job. He's followed the data. He's followed the science. I've tried to be part of a team that has helped him make decisions on when to close, what to close, and when and what to open safely. No one should be surprised about the fact that moving into the cooler weather, more indoor activities, school being back to whatever extent it can be, that there will be a rise in cases. We have built the infrastructure to try to manage that. The governor has kept certain things closed that probably need to be closed for the time being. They're trying to judiciously loosen the reins a little bit, but mark my words, this is going to continue to be an issue for the people of the United States and the people of the world for probably another year or two. We just need to get used to a new normal as we try to normalize our lives and revive our economy. I believe that a big testament to the people of Connecticut is the fact that they're educated, they're thoughtful, they're smart. I'm not going to make it a partisan issue because I think that's not the right thing to do. But the people of Connecticut, once they realized the damage and the tidal wave that was coming our way in March, rallied and have voluntarily done the right thing. I run a business. I've kept people working. I have worked hard to reward them by giving them extra pay to keep working because they're putting themselves at risk. Nobody has stopped working unless we had an outbreak where we had to shut down, and then we were able to pay people. But we've given everybody increased income, and we paid for 100% of their healthcare insurance costs during this whole time. I'm proud of that. I also run a municipality, and we've done a great job. I have a phenomenal health director and a great team of people working in the town hall. I know that, for example, Colchester and most of the towns around here, all the towns around here, have stepped up and responded and have done a fabulous job managing the towns that they lead through this pandemic. But the real credit goes to the people of the state of Connecticut. Leaders lead, but the people are the ones, we don't have the staff to manage everybody's interaction. Virtually everybody that I know has been respectful of the fact that this is a killer. Even if it won't kill a majority of people of a certain age, those people are respectful. They're trying to do the right thing. And that is what's going to get us through this. People trying to figure out how to function, how business should operate. Some need help. In fact, most need help to get through this. Otherwise, we're going to drive ourselves into a depression worse than 1929. So Congress is poised to act with more money. There's dickering up there. They need to stop. I've spoken to Joe Courtney. They're willing to compromise. It's the Senate, and the U.S. Senate is just not willing to compromise at this point. And more than anything, those folks need to make some decisions to make sure that whole industries in the United States don't fail. They are on the verge of failing. I listened today to the CEO of American Airlines. They're talking about, what they say, 40 million people worldwide could lose their jobs because of the airline industry. That's a devastating loss to the world. We cannot have that. We need to sustain these businesses to make sure that they come through the other side of this, and that we don't have to rebuild transportation infrastructure from the ground up. We can't afford to do that. We cannot afford to let them fail.
Okay. So you're right about what's happening in Congress finally. The Democrats had, I think, a $3 trillion HEROES Act that I know Congressman Courtney's been touting and saying how important it is. It gives money to local and state and all the things that you were talking about. But I think Nancy Pelosi has cut that back to a $2 trillion package in order to get the negotiations going and get something passed. Let me ask you, Norm. Phase 3 is supposed to start, I think, October 8th. Given the headlines in the Hartford Courant today, increasing cases, do you think we're going to go forward with the implementation of Phase 3?
I hope so. I've been on calls with the commissioner of DECD, David Lehman. I interact closely with the governor's team on this, and I'm hopeful that we can still do this, because we're not opening up the spigot and say life is back to normal. It's not back to normal. That, the opening of restaurants, allowing more density in there. If people are not mindful, we're going to be right back in the mess that we're in March. We cannot have that. There are no viable treatments that improve outcomes at this point. So whether it's theaters or places of assembly and group sizes, we're going to do it slowly, monitor the data, and then make decisions about whether it's working or whether we have to roll it back. That's the way to do this. It's not to say, I want the economy open at all costs. You cannot do that, because I don't want blood on my hands. We have people that think that the economy has got to go back to normal at all costs. We obviously can't afford to have a shutdown economy. So we're back to about 90%, 85%, but there are whole industries that are struggling in Connecticut and in the country. And we need to make sure that we don't lose all those. So this is why being prudent, making sure that there's adequate money for businesses to survive is going to be critical. And yes, Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats have actually compromised. And there's a moment at which you say no, that the other side has to come to the table, and they need to come up with something viable. And what they've come up with is not viable. Too many people get hurt with their proposals, and it's not acceptable.
Right. The last question on the COVID that I wanted to ask you was, despite the fact that we are doing well in Connecticut. We praise our governor and the administration for how they've been leading us through this. And you praise the people for, in the most part, 99% following the rules and doing what's right. But what about testing? Have we ever gotten to the point where we have the proper amount of testing and the way that people can get a test when they need one, and doing the testing and tracing that helps us develop how people are contracting this virus? I don't think we've done enough about that. Just speak to that issue, Norm.
Sure. Well, I think we're a lot better off than we were, but we're not better off because there's been a national plan to deal with this. The president threw up his hands and said, let the states deal with it. And that's not mobilizing a national effort, in my opinion. Testing is one of those things that if you have 50 different states operating on different wavelengths, trying to come up with solutions, you're wasting a lot of time and effort. So I think we've done well. I think we've done better. I think we need to do more. I look forward to a day when everybody could get a bottle of 50 test strips that they can just spit on or put a little bit of saliva on that gives them a result in 15 minutes. My understanding is that there are scientists working on that at Yale right now. That's a critical development, in my opinion, so that people actually know when they may have contracted it, because from the very beginning, there are unique aspects to this disease that make it so dangerous. One is it's airborne. It's critically dangerous that it's airborne, because just talking to somebody could result in passing it in a way that other pandemic type diseases have not happened. The other is it could be incubated for anywhere from 3 days to 15 days. That's why they're saying everybody who may be exposed needs to quarantine for 14 days. Not too many diseases incubate for that long. And then the other critical factor is the asymptomatic carriers. Asymptomatic carriers are walking time bombs. They may feel perfectly fine. They may have no symptoms or minor symptoms or what they think are unrelated symptoms, but they just may be passing it on from person to person to person. That is unfortunately largely what happened at the beginning of the pandemic when people were not wearing masks. At least wearing masks cut down 50 to 75% of the transmission from you to someone else. And that is a critical element. Staying apart, wearing a mask. This is not rocket science. That this is what keeps people safe and alive. This is what has kept our caseload down. And I think that hopefully in the next several months, we're going to see progress on approval for vaccinations, but then you have the logistical issue of getting them out to as many people as you can. There's a definite concern that because this administration in Washington has had their hand deeply into the process of communication, that there's a fear that the vaccines are going to be rushed. And, an adverse reaction in a clinical trial translates to 300,000 people in the country potentially getting an adverse reaction, because they don't do clinical trials on everybody. They pick a group of people, they try to make it a representative group, but one adverse reaction stops a trial, just like the AstraZeneca trial. They had to stop it. So rushing this is very dangerous for people. People need confidence to know that if there's a vaccine, that it's been vetted without political influence. So I think that we will have better testing. I think I look forward to the day when I can have 100 strips and I can test myself every day. That if I've been exposed, I just go into a house and pray that I don't get that sick. Everybody should have a tube of 100 tests, and they should be cheap or free so that we keep people safe. And it should be nationally overseen, not state by state. What we're doing is we have states competing, just like at the beginning of the pandemic, for personal protective equipment. They were battling with each other. They were outbidding each other. Chinese were sitting back and saying, we're going to make a lot of money on this because New York put in a bid and then California outbid them and another state outbid them. This is not a way to run a country. It is not a way to do an incident management. It's not a way to manage a crisis. It's a disaster.
Right. So you make 2 points that will kind of end this part of the discussion on. One, there is no national plan. We shouldn't just be 50 states competing against each other, as you said, and that's hurt the overall response in the country. We see other areas of the country where they are opening up too soon, where there are outbreaks that are happening. We're still having 750 to 1,000 people die every day from the virus. That's one point that you made. No national plan. How awful is that? The second point you made leads to the issue of the politicization of science. You're a scientist in the work that you do in your laboratories. And when the politicians put their finger on the scale, when Trump, let's say it, when he pressures the scientists and the scientific community and they count to that and they accede to his pressure, that is a very, very sad state. And what it does is it takes my faith in what's happening with the vaccines or anything scientific coming out of the government and shakes that to its foundations. Have you ever heard of a situation in America where the scientists are being pressured by the politicians?
Well, I'd like to say no, but the answer to that question is think about climate change. The science is pretty well established that human activity is influencing climates on the planet. And you don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand that. We are doing stuff, the science has been clear for 30 years on this. And even if the Republicans at one time wanted to deal with it, now they are so owned by the chemical and fossil fuel industries that they don't want to do anything. And the way they deal with it is to deny that it's going on. So why am I surprised that they're denying science when it comes to the pandemic? Why am I surprised that Donald Trump has got his finger on the scale? If he was leading, he would do the right thing and let the scientists do their job and back away. But he has to, this is a political issue for him. And all I will say is anything he accuses people of are the things he's doing. So when he says that Democrats are politicizing the virus, Democrats are trying to save lives. He's putting his finger on the scale every place he can from the beginning. I'm finishing Bob Woodward's book. It's an astounding read to get into the mind of that person. But I'm not here really to, disassemble Donald Trump. I'm here to say that Democrats don't do that. We listen. We try to take all positions and all points of view. We look at the data. We look at the science. I look at all that. I'm an analytical person. I get some flack on some of the decisions and positions that I take within my own caucus because I don't rush headlong into believing something just because somebody tells it to me. You have to have your own brain. You have to have your own thought process. And I look at data. I want to make sure, even on energy policy, that what we do doesn't raise costs unmanageably for everyone in the state of Connecticut.
Okay. All
I
right.
put a lot of time and effort into that.
Right. We're going to get to that to finish up our interview today. But so I want to preface that by saying we had a rough spring and a rough summer on top of the pandemic. We had the crisis of some police brutality and racial injustice and racial strife and protests that we saw. Connecticut legislature passed the Police Accountability Act, where they made all kinds of new legislation about how police were to approach people, search and seizure and things of that sort. Very important that people should take a look at in response to that. Then we had, in the middle of all of that as if the pandemic wasn't enough and the police issues weren't enough, we had an energy blackout in Connecticut that went on for some people for days. And I know that you are the Senate chair of the Energy and Technology Commission. You are taking the lead in the Take Back Our Grid Act. The legislature is now in special session, and you're going to be taking the lead on that bill. So let's start with first 2 questions. One, how did that happen? Why did that happen to us? And why are energy costs in Connecticut probably higher than any other state in the country?
Well, that's a lot to unpack, Sheila. But I will say that the night that we were voting on the police bill, I was getting a slew of emails about the rate increase that people experienced in July. So even before the storm, the rate issue came up. And I was immediately committed to the fact that we wanted a thorough investigation of what happened. It's a lot of explanations. The public has a right to know. Some of the rate increase was justifiable. Some of it we think might not have been. We are relying on PURA, which is the Public Utilities Regulatory Agency, and its new chair to unpack the rates for the public to make sure that both Eversource and United Illuminating calculated things correctly, because we're not sure that they did or didn't. So the first thing that hit was the rate increase, and that was enough to blow up my email. Then on my birthday, that storm hit. And needless to say, it wasn't the best birthday I've ever had. But I've been involved in a lot of storm management as the first selectman over the last 10 years. And even as in my years as a selectman also, I would say that the performance and the communication on the part of Eversource, which is the area I represent. I don't represent United Illuminating's region of the state, but Eversource has most of it. And their performance, whether they think it was good or not one resident in the state of Connecticut thinks they did a good job. I mean, you can't walk around as a company management team saying, hey, we did great, when none of your customers think you did good at all. And I think that it was tone deaf. For a company that made $1 billion in profit and a management team that pulls down $50 or $60 million, I think that they're tone deaf. I have met with them, all decent people, but I think they're a company that's led by their shareholders' needs and not by their ratepayers' needs. And we need to change that. We need them to be more accountable, more communicative with the town CEOs, with the ratepayers directly, and less worried on their profit and their bottom line. They're a public utility. People do not have a choice about where to buy their power. They have to buy their power. They have to be connected to the grid. And they really don't have a lot of say. Up to now, I would say that PURA was sort of the balancing act between the ratepayer and the company. I think that they could have done a better job over the years. And I think I'm very encouraged by the new leadership at PURA, because I think that we finally have a true person there who understands what it is to regulate. It's a regulatory body, and not everybody on that committee, not everybody on PURA is a regulator by trade. There's a value to that because it makes it harder for the utilities to get away with stuff. So I'm hoping that we've had a 20-year walk into the woods as a result of deregulation, which I want to address next year because I'm not sure it worked in the best interest of the ratepayers. But I believe that we're going to have a walk out of the woods over a few years. People will at least know what they're paying for, and hopefully we can get the rates down. Hopefully we can get the grid improved so that we're not sitting here screaming about how many crews they brought in to fix things after the damage occurred. We want them to be doing more maintenance and more grid improvement so that they can do more stuff that's 21st century grid management, not 19th century grid management. And I'm afraid that they have not been great at doing that.
All right, so will your Take Back Our Grid Act, will that pass in this session of the legislature? You're working on that right now, right?
I'm hoping.
Okay.
I want to just make a plug for my committee and the leadership of my committee. I'm the Senate chair of the Energy and Technology Committee. I have a House chair who lives in the Danbury area, which was particularly badly hit in this storm and was the last area in Connecticut to come online. But I have a ranking member who's in the Senate, who's Paul Formica, who is a longtime old friend of mine, long before either one of us got in public life, and Charlie Ferraro, who's a state rep from down in West Haven. The four of us have worked very collaboratively to come up with a plan that we think is a template for creating a better framework to regulate these utilities. We're going to make them more accountable to us and less accountable to their shareholders. So we've worked hard. We've worked collaboratively. I think I'd like us to be an example of that kind of collaborative work in the Connecticut General Assembly, that all voices matter. Democrats are certainly the majority, and we need to, our ranking members know that. There's no question about it, but we're not going to automatically discount their voices. They have been at the table all the time, and they have really participated in a positive way. So I'm very, very grateful for that. My House co-chair is bringing out the bill today. The House is in session as we speak. There's 10 different things, 10 different bills on the agenda for a special session, which is an awful lot. We are going in tomorrow, assuming they get done today. I suspect they'll be there till 2 in the morning. And
Wow.
I suspect I'll be there till 2 in the morning tomorrow. But I'm hoping that our bill passes with broad bipartisan support.
Okay, great. So I know you, given all of that and everything we've been through this last year and a half leading up to the election in November, you still want to be reelected and be the state senator from the 33rd. Other than the energy issue, just give us in your final summation, what are some of the other issues you want to tackle when you get back to the legislature if you're reelected?
So I love being in the legislature. I love the work I do, much to the chagrin of some people in my family, which I have to do better with. I love working, and I'm certainly at a point in my life where I could retire, but I love serving the people. I made a decision at 50 that my Act Two, even though we still own the business and my sons are running it, they're actually happier when I'm not here. But they know that I'm here to help. I decided that my Act Two was going to be public service. I am going to do that for as long as the public wants me to do that. I am committed to doing the best job that I can to serve the people, Democrats, Republicans, unaffiliated people, just like I've done in Essex. My last municipal election, I won 75-25. I had an opponent. People decided that I was the best choice to continue running the town, knowing full well that I'm continuing to do the Senate job. And I believe that this gives me, being in Essex, gives me sort of the baseline understanding of how the towns in this state interact. I'm going to do both jobs for as long as I can. And I want to serve the people. That's why I'm here. There's no money in it for me. I don't take anything from the state of Connecticut. In order to be legally an employee of the town of Essex, I take a token amount of money for what is a full-time job. And the town speaks for itself. And I hope my work in the Senate speaks for itself. I am committed. It's really like having multiple full-time jobs, and I will do it for as long as I can.
Okay, great. So, Norm, good luck in your race. We'll be following everything until November 3rd. And when you're reelected, we'll come back and talk about what's on the agenda at that point. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for watching Norm, State Senator in the 33rd District in Connecticut, and the leader of the Take Back Our Grid Act, which is being heard in the legislature right now. Thank you. See you all next time on Talkback. Bye, Norm. Bye.
Thank you, Sheila.
Thank you.